Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for attending today's candidate orientation, virtual candidate orientation, I should say. I understand that some candidates are on site in the room with Kim and members of City of Rochester, and others are joining us maybe from the comforts of their home. So I am Stacy Bell. I am the president of Fire and Police Selection, and our company is a consulting firm that's located in Sacramento, or right outside, I should say, of Sacramento, California. We're located in Folsom, California, just east of Sacramento. And our company has worked with public safety departments for the last 25 years, departments in the United States, departments in Canada, and we essentially provide any type of a test or an assessment that is used to make a hiring or a promotional decision. And so we were asked to work with the City of Rochester on another entry-level firefighter EMT recruitment, whereby we will be providing the written test that you all will take, which will likely be the first hurdle, if you will, in your recruitment process. So the purpose of today's presentation is to hopefully alleviate any fears or concerns or questions that you may have as you go into the written test scheduled for early next year. So what I'd like to do today is to just kind of provide you with some background on how the written test was selected. How did we get to where we decided upon the test that you all will be taking? So we'll provide a description of the written test. We'll provide you with some tips on how to prepare for the written test. We'll go over some sample test items, and I'll show you a couple little tricks of the trade, if you will, for how to be successful on the test. And we'll talk about some good takeaways for what to do on the day of the test. So once you've had time to review the preparatory materials and all that good stuff, and then you show up on the actual test date, what should you do? Okay, and then we'll finish with whatever time we have remaining with some questions and answers. Hopefully, most of your questions will be answered in the form of this presentation, but if they're not, I'll be happy to spend some time and take questions you might have. Okay, so let's start off with how this test was selected. Anytime that we do test development and validation here at FPSI, we always start with a job analysis. And essentially what we're wanting to glean from the job analysis is we want to know what are those skills and abilities that are going to make a good firefighter a good firefighter. So what we do is we work with a group of job experts from the department. In this instance, we worked with firefighters and supervisors, lieutenants and captains from Rochester Fire Department, who sat with me for a full day job analysis workshop. And we went through and talked about all of the different job duties that firefighters with Rochester Fire Department will perform. So we had a huge list. There's about 30 pages worth of job duties. If you all are lucky enough to become a firefighter one day, you will be responsible for doing a lot of different tasks and duties. So once we identified those job duties that firefighters with Rochester perform, we also needed to identify what are the knowledge, skills, abilities, and personal characteristics that a firefighter needs to possess in order to perform those job duties. So another many pages of different knowledge, skills, abilities, and personal characteristics. So once we have identified these, then the job experts provide all kinds of ratings so that we can identify of all of these knowledge, skills, abilities, and personal characteristics, what are the most critical to successful firefighter job performance? And most importantly, which do not require any type of learning and brief orientation or any type of training. Because we certainly, for an entry-level firefighter test, we would not want to measure any skill or ability that you're going to learn once you get in the academy or you're going to be trained on. Instead, we want to focus exclusively on those critical and extremely critical skills and abilities that you need to bring to the table first day on the job. That's how you, in a job-related and valid way, go about selecting your written test. So when we met with the job experts and collected all of this data, we discovered that the job experts said different skills, abilities, and personal characteristics that are critical or extremely critical to being a successful firefighter with Rochester Fire. An example is reading ability, right? Firefighters have to possess reading ability first day on the job. Nobody is going to be trained on how to read. Things like teamwork. When you consider 80-90% of the job of firefighter is EMS related, whereby you all are living in a station environment, cohabitating with one another, engaging with citizens and patients in the community. Clearly, you need to demonstrate that you have teamwork skills. Integrity is important. Decision making, not decision making in the sense of how you'll be trained to make the right decisions once you're hired. We're just talking about sound decision making that you bring to the table first day on the job. Okay, certainly some job knowledges are important, different interpersonal skills, spatial orientation. So all of these kinds of skills and abilities popped up when I worked with the Rochester Fire Department job experts. So we look at these skills and abilities in the green section of this Venn diagram here, and we say, okay, we know what's critical for a successful entry-level firefighter. Of these critical skills and abilities, which ones lend themselves nicely to being measured on a written test? Okay, so clearly we can't measure physical abilities on a written test, right? We can't measure verbal skills on a written test, but we can measure a whole host of other critical skills and abilities that came from the Rochester Fire Department firefighter job description. And that is what you all will be responsible for, demonstrating that you possess these critical skills and abilities by virtue of the written test. Okay, so you all applied to the job. Those candidates who had qualified through their application were identified, and they will be invited to participate in the firefighter EMT written test. The written test is designed to identify those candidates who possess the minimum competencies needed to be successful as a firefighter only in those skills and abilities that we're measuring by the written test. I don't know what other steps, I'm not quite sure. We're just providing the written test, but perhaps there's a physical ability of some kind, perhaps there's an oral interview. So all of those other skills and abilities will be measured potentially in a different assessment. But for the written test, we are focusing exclusively on those skills and abilities that are needed first day on the job, which do not require any previous experience as a firefighter and which can be measured on a written test. Okay, so when you sit and take the test, know again that if you have never set foot in a fire station and you know that your buddy sitting next to you, volunteered for years at a department, that is not going to give them an advantage on this test. You will have the ability to perform just as well with no previous experience, no fire knowledge, because those, again, are the skills and abilities that we're focusing on with this written test. Okay, so let's talk about this test. We have a number of different entry-level firefighter tests that we offer to our clients across the country and in Canada. The test that lent itself nicely for Rochester Fire, based upon the ratings that came from the job analysis workshop that we conducted, is the Firefighter Aptitude and Character Test, also known as our FACT test. We're very acronym happy here at FPSI. So our FACT test is a 110-item multiple choice test that consists of 5 different components, or 5 different constructs, if you will. And those components or constructs are listed here. The first component is reading ability. So in the reading ability measure, it's not reading ability in the sense that you read some paragraphs or some passages and then you close that section of the test and you answer questions and have to demonstrate your ability to retain and recall what you read. That's a different measure of more crystallized reading, if you will. For this test, we want you to be able to read a passage passage and refer to the passage if you need to answer the question. So you are going to read a page or two of written material, and then you'll answer a series of questions, I believe 5 questions from each of the different reading passages. So there are a total of 15 reading ability items on the test. Okay, the next section that job experts said is necessary to be successful as an entry-level firefighter is mathematical reasoning. Now, we are not talking about complicated math at all. It doesn't matter if you didn't take algebra or pre-calc or any type of level of math like that. We are talking about the ability to demonstrate that you know how to perform basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That's it. So don't be too worried about the math items on the test. And as far as, if you're sitting there thinking, gosh, why would a firefighter need to have math skills? I can't really envision that. You could imagine, for example, if your fire captain says, I need you to go from the back of the engine over to the building that's 600 feet away and drag hose over there. And you know that hose comes in 50-foot sections. You're going to have to try to figure out pretty quickly how many hose sections you're going to need to get to 600 feet, right? So just really basic division to be able to do that. So don't get too concerned about the mathematical reasoning. And also, since you are taking a paper and pencil test, you are free to write in the test booklet. So if you choose to make calculations, which I would if I was a test taker, in the booklet, you are absolutely free to write in the booklet and do your calculations there. But a calculator is not allowed on this test, okay? The next section is writing ability, and there are 10 items that measure different writing ability. And we're talking about your understanding of spelling, grammar, punctuation, the ability to compose a logically well understood sentence. Nothing complicated in the writing ability section either. The next section is map reading. This is going to demonstrate your aptitudes in to have spatial orientation. Sometimes, you may be working in a smoky environment where you have to have your bearings and you have to have spatial orientation to keep yourself safe and your partner safe and whoever you're assisting. So demonstrating that you can show that you have spatial orientation is an important piece. So we have 10 map reading items in the test. And then the final section of the test is the human relations section. And the human relations section has 60 different items. It's really going to feel like 30 different items because what you'll do is you'll read a passage and then you will answer 2 questions from each of those passages. You'll be asked to identify the most appropriate way to handle that situation and the least appropriate way to handle that situation. So in theory, it is 2 questions on the test, but you're only having to read 1 passage for those 2 answers, okay? If you're wondering, gosh, why so many items in human relations compared to the other components of the test? When we built this test, we worked with about 140 different chiefs from across the country, and we asked for their guidance on if they were to kind of buy the ideal firefighter, if you will, and we gave them $100 to spread their money across these 5 constructs here. How would you spend your money? And the chiefs unanimously all said there's definitely a place in the written test to measure cognitive abilities and different aptitudes like reading and map and math. But given that, firefighters live in a station environment and have to engage with one another daily and the community, we really need to make sure that these folks demonstrate the human relations part that's critical to the job. So that's why we have about a 45% weight on the aptitudes and a 55% weight on the human relations items. Okay. This test is a test whereby every item on the test is worth 1 point. Some other tests that you may have taken, particularly if it included a personality inventory or even a non-personality, but other items may carry different weights. Some items may be negatively scored. So that's a real possibility, another test that you've taken, and we have some like that, but that's not this test. This test has 110 items on it, and the highest score you can achieve is a 110. So every item is worth 1 point. Okay. And another good thing to know about this test is that this test is scored in a compensatory fashion. So what we mean by that is that you don't have to achieve minimum scores in each of the different constructs in order to pass this test. Instead, just like you would on the job, you're able to compensate for your overall aptitude based on strengths that you may have in other areas. So if mathematical reasoning is not your thing, but you can absolutely nail the reading ability and the writing and the map and the human relations, you stand a very good chance to still do well on this test. Okay, that compensatory fashion is helpful. Okay, and this is a big question that I typically get from candidates is, what score do I need to pass the test? Well, I can't answer that question because we set cutoff scores. We do this because this is what the courts and the uniform guidelines on employee selection and all the powers that be that make sure that vendors like us are doing things in a fair and valid and defensible manner. We set cutoff scores based upon the test administration. And so some of the factors that we consider are statistics that come from that group of data. Once you all complete the test and the answer sheets are sent back to our office, we'll be able to calculate things like standard deviations and reliabilities and everything. And those are factors that go into identifying the appropriate cutoff score for this test administration. However, I can tell you that typically speaking, we tend to see cutoff scores in the range of anywhere from 71 to 78% on this test. So hopefully that's helpful to you and makes you feel better. You don't need to achieve a 90 or a 95 to pass this test. Typical passing rates are anywhere from about 71 to 78%. Okay? So how do I prepare for this test? Well, here's the good news. Since this test is not a job knowledge test, you all are not responsible for mastering any required preparatory materials. So hopefully you'll get hired by Rochester, and hopefully you'll desire to become a fire captain or a lieutenant or a battalion chief or something one day, in which case you will be required to memorize all kinds of complicated technical fire related material, but that is not the case for this entry-level firefighter test. Okay, so what I mean by that is that you don't have to feel the onus of being responsible for all kinds of knowledge and information. Instead, I would argue that life at this point has prepped you with the different skills and abilities that you have, that you will need to demonstrate whether or not you meet those minimum competencies to be successful as a firefighter with Rochester. Many of our clients do not do what the city of Rochester has done. They were very, very proactive in providing you all access free of charge to the candidate orientation guide and to different video clips that we've recorded that describe the firefighter aptitude and character test, and that comes at a fee. And candidates go to our website and they purchase these candidate orientation guides and these training videos, but the city said, nope, we are not going to have candidates come out of pocket for that. We want everybody to have a fair and equal opportunity, and we are providing these free of charge. So you all should have access from the City of Rochester's website. This is just a little clip that I took, a little screenshot to show you. Hopefully this looks familiar to you. There's a section on the website that will direct you to the candidate orientation guide, study guide, practice test items, as well as the videos. And so this is just an example of what it looks like. It's that recruitment community, and you'll click that little yellow button, and it might ask you for your first name, last name, and email address. And then once you're there, you should have access to a PDF candidate orientation guide, and then different video clips that describe the different sections of the written test. Okay. So also, as much as of a businesswoman as I am and love to make money for the company, you don't need to go to our website and purchase anything. So please don't go to our website and think, oh man, FPSI has this this candidate orientation guide and these other videos. It's probably different than what Rochester had. It's not, and you would be wasting money to obtain materials that you've been given free of charge. So honestly, you don't need to go to our website and come out of pocket for anything, okay? The good news about these materials, if you're a little nervous or feeling a little bit scared about the written test and gosh, am I going to do well? Am I ready for this? The items that you'll see in the candidate orientation guide and those that are described in the video are very, very similar to the items that are on the actual test. And I can say this with 100% certainty because I'm responsible for developing the items in the candidate orientation guide, and I develop the items on the actual written test. So no one knows better about how similar those items are than yours truly. Okay. So let's take a look at a couple of sample items. I'd like to just give you a sample item from each of the 5 different constructs of the firefighter aptitude and character test. I mentioned that there are passages that you will be presented with to take before you take the reading ability test items. Sometimes the passages are nothing more than text that you will just read. Sometimes the passages include charts or diagrams and things like this. So this is an example of a reading ability item that requires you to read information from a chart. So this chart shows information about physical characteristics of some liquids. Okay, and you are asked to answer the question, which of the following statements is true? Okay, so let me stop there and give you a recommendation whenever you take a multiple choice test. So as much as you may want to read the question, read the answers, and once you think, oh my gosh, that's the answer, I'm moving on to the next question, I really encourage you to read all of the possible choices and make sure that you are sticking with your original answer. So let's go through these and I'll show you what we're talking about, okay? So which of the following statements is true? Gasoline has the highest vapor density and the lowest explosive range. Well, you can go over to the column that has the vapor density for gasoline, and we see that gasoline has a vapor density of 3.00, and that is the highest of all 4 of our choices, right? But now we have to look and see, does it have the lowest explosive range? So we go over to the explosive ranges, and we see that the low end of gasoline is 1.4%, but down here, kerosene is 0.7%. So we know that choice A is not correct. So what about B? Acetone has the highest explosive range and the highest specific gravity. So we go over here to acetone, we follow across to our column that talks about explosive range, and we're looking to see if it has the highest explosive range. Well, 12.8%, and we see ethanol has 19%. So we know that that's not true. But let's keep reading. And it also has the highest specific gravity. Well, go over to specific gravity, and we see that acetone is tied with ethanol, right? 0.79 for both of them. So B is not the right choice. What about C? Ethanol and acetone have the same specific gravity and the same vapor density. Okay, ethanol and acetone have the same specific gravity. Okay, that's true, 0.79 and 0.79. And do they have the same vapor density? Vapor density, nope, they don't. So I'm guessing that D is the right answer, but let's see. Kerosene has the lowest ignition temperature. Yes, that part of the question is true. And the highest specific gravity. Yes, 0.98 is the highest. So we're going to choose D as the answer, and that is the right answer. Okay, so you see here's an example of how you really need to read all of the possibilities before you come to making a decision on the right answer for this reading ability item. Okay, again, some items are nothing but text in the passages, and other times you may find charts that you have to read. Okay, here's a sample mathematical reasoning item, and this is a perfect example of where I would write in the test booklet. So the question says an adult victim has 1/4 of his back burned, all of his arm burned, and half of his head burned. Using the burn chart below, determine what % total of the victim is burned. Okay, so we are going to look down here and we're going to say the victim has 1/4 of his back burned. Well, if his entire back is 20%, how much is 1/4 of 20%? Well, that's 5%. So I would write 5 over here. And then all of his arm is burned. So what percentage of the total body is the arm? That's 15%. So I would write 15 over here. And then half of his head is burned. And if his head is 15%, but only half is burned, we know that half of 15 is 7.5, so I would write 7.5 over here. And then I would sum up those numbers to get at what % of the victim is burned. And we see that our choices are 25.5%, 27.5%, 30.5%, and 35.5%. And again, the right answer is 27.5%. So you see what I'm talking here. We had to do, basic division or multiplication, depending on which way you calculated your percentage, and then addition. Nothing scary, nothing super complicated here with the math. Okay, writing ability test. Questions. So why do firefighters have to demonstrate basic writing skills? Well, firefighters are responsible for completing logs and filling out entries in different systems in the station and, documenting things. Maybe when you're in the field, maybe you're documenting things. Maybe you're leaving notes for the oncoming shift and you're passing along some notes of what happened at the last shift. And it's not that you need to be the William Shakespeare of the group, but you do need to demonstrate that you have a grasp of basic sentence structure and grammar and spelling and those good things, just so people can understand what it is that you may have written down. Okay, so here's an example of a writing ability item, and the question asks the candidate to identify the type of error that is found in the following sentence. So you'll read this bolded sentence. It'll be very clear in the test booklet what it is. It's a little harder on this PowerPoint, but you're reading this question or this statement. Sometimes the difference between being a good firefighter and an average firefighter comes down to whether or not the firefighter is properly trained. So we're identifying the type of error that is found in this sentence. So do we see a spelling error? Do we see a grammar error? Do we see a punctuation error? Or is there no error at all? And the right answer for this, of course, is that there is a spelling error. The word weather should be W-H-E-T-H-E-R, whether or not weather as in bright sunny conditions or snowy, cloudy conditions, right? So you would identify that the problem with this sentence is that there's a spelling error. And circle or bubble in on your Scantron A for spelling error. Okay, couple more examples here. This one is going to show you a map, and it gives the instructions to use the following map to answer the question below. So if I'm a candidate, at first I'm kind of getting my bearings here. I'm familiarizing myself with this image. I'm looking and realizing that the test provides me with a north, south, east, west to reference. I'm looking and realizing that there are different streets that run horizontally and vertically. There are different road signs. There's an E with an underline here. I don't know what that means. There are numbers in some of the boxes that have circles. I don't know what that means, but I bet in the test question it's going to explain that. So here's our test question. It says, you are at the entrance to the bank and turn east on Mustang Ave. What is the first one-way street you will reach? And now here's our information. Note the entrance is indicated by an underlined capitalized E. So again, we are at the entrance to the bank, which means that we're right about here, and we turn east on Mustang Avenue. Well, we know from our little legend down here that east means that we're going to go right. So what is the first one-way street that you will reach? And our choices are First Street, Second Street, Third Street, or Fourth Street. Okay, so First Street, oh yeah, First Street is a one-way street, but in order for the answer to be First Street, I would have to go west, not east, and that's not what I'm doing. So we know it's not First Street. Okay, Second Street. Second Street, there's nothing here to indicate that this is a one-way street, so it's not Second Street. Okay, my next choice is Third Street. Yeah, Third Street there's a one-way sign. You see up here it says Third Street. So the answer could be Third Street. And let me go Fourth Street. Fourth Street also is a one-way. So both of these choices, C and D, could be correct. But the question says, what is the first one-way street that you will reach? So the first one-way street that we will reach, of course, is C, Third Street. Okay, not a complicated question. Some may be a little bit more difficult than others, but they're really not complicated. You just need to make sure that you're looking at the images, following the instructions when they say, for example, that entrance is indicated by an underlined E, or a corner of the building is indicated by a number in a circle. So you'll be provided with everything you need to answer those questions, okay? Okay. This takes us to the last section of the written test. And as you can see, those items, the content that we just talked about, the reading ability and the map and the math and the writing, those are all types of items that as a consultant who's trained in IO psychology, I can write those questions all day long because I can write questions based upon a critical skill and ability. It does not take me to know anything about being a firefighter to put questions like that into existence. So we take care of writing all of those items. When I develop a new test and it's going to have a human relations measure in it, I like for the human relations questions to come directly from firefighters. And the reason why is because I want these to be real life scenarios that a firefighter, I should say, very likely could face once they are on the job. And please hear me loudly here, but which do not require any type of job knowledge or experience. So when I sit with my firefighters and fire captains in our test validation workshop, I'll give them a list of skills and abilities that I want to measure. I'll say things like, come up with a scenario on the job where somebody had to demonstrate honesty or integrity or team working skills or interpersonal skills. So I tee them up with different types of critical skills and abilities that we want to measure. But these come from the job experts who say, oh my gosh, I remember a time when Frank was on the job and he handled this situation really well that involved decision making, and I can come up with a perfect scenario. Or I remember a time when John was on the job and he just blew it in demonstrating decision making, so I'm going to come up with a scenario like that. So when you get to this part of the test, know that these are real scenarios that job experts have said are very similar to situations that you could be faced with first day on the job without any time of training or learning and brief orientation, okay? So this first scenario says firefighter Green is a new firefighter and feels left out when the other firefighters talk at the station. He feels that the other firefighters ignore him on purpose and treat him as if he's not part of the team. What is the best way for firefighter Green to handle this situation? So if you remember a little bit ago, I told you that for these items, you will read one vignette or one scenario, and then you will be asked to identify the most appropriate way to handle that situation and the least appropriate way to handle that situation. So our choices are: A, firefighter Green should take interest in the conversations and spend time getting to know the other firefighters. B, firefighter Green should tell his supervisor that the other firefighters are ignoring him. C, Firefighter Green should ignore the other firefighters and allow time to pass before doing anything. Or D, Firefighter Green should confront the other firefighters and ask why they are ignoring him. Okay, so we have a scenario. We have 4 possible ways to handle this situation. The job experts not only developed the vignette or the scenario, but they were also asked to identify the most appropriate way to handle this situation, the least appropriate way to handle this situation, and 2 alternatives, which are neither the most appropriate way nor the least appropriate way. So they're just distractors. They're developed and placed in there to have a candidate at least consider them, but to ultimately choose the most appropriate and the least appropriate. Okay, so for this example, question number 1 would ask you to identify the most appropriate response, and question 2 would say what's the least appropriate. And based upon a 90% or more, it's almost always 100% consensus before it gets into my test, we have to have a massive consensus from the job experts that these answers are right. And with 100% confirmation, the job experts said that the most appropriate way to handle this situation is A, Firefighter Green should take interest in the conversations and spend time getting to know the firefighters. And the least appropriate way to handle this situation is Firefighter Green should tell his supervisor that the other firefighters are ignoring him. Okay, so that's a perfect example of those human relations questions. Again, they aren't going to you don't need to be trained on proper interpersonal skills, right? You'll be trained on all kinds of other things, but knowing as a new firefighter, if I'm faced with this situation, I probably shouldn't immediately go to my supervisor. That's probably not going to make for great relations in the station. Certainly, if there is a situation that is about safety or a violation or anything like that, you should never be afraid to say, yes, I would go to my supervisor. But in this scenario where it's more of maybe you're just a new person and you're a little bit sensitive and you feel like you're left out, probably going to a supervisor is not the best choice. Okay, but don't be afraid to go to a supervisor or select that as a choice on items on the test if clearly that's the right way to handle the situation. Okay, it's not always bad to go to the supervisor. Okay, so test day tips. You will not be allowed. You'll have access to that candidate orientation guide that the City of Rochester has been kind enough to provide, and you may print it out, download it and print it out and carry it around with you. Have it in your car when you pull into the parking lot, but that little baby needs to stay in the car and not brought in with you when you take the test, okay? You will not be allowed to refer to any materials once you get into that classroom, okay? Please, if you hear nothing else that I talked about today, please hear this. Please answer every single item on the test. Please make sure as the first page, when you unsealed the test booklet and the first page will tell you there are 110 items in this test, please confirm that your booklet has 110 items. Please go to the last page of your booklet and make sure that you see 110 listed as the last item. And then please bubble in 110 answers on your answer sheet. What happens is if you don't answer a question, you entirely miss out on an opportunity for points. So think of it this way. Every single question on this test has 4 possible answers, right? So if you were blindfolded, you have a 25% chance of guessing correctly. So 25% chance of guessing correctly versus 100% chance of getting no points if you leave it blank. I would play those odds all day. So nothing kills me more when I score all these answer sheets for our clients and I see candidates that just didn't bubble in. Don't be afraid. Choose A, choose B, choose whatever's your favorite letter out of the 4 if you don't know, but at least take a chance on guessing, okay? I think some candidates maybe leave answers blank because they think from some of the other tests that they've taken that, some items are negatively scored or I can actually lose points if I answer incorrectly. That is not this test. So you will receive 1 point for answers that are answered correctly and 0 points for items that are answered incorrectly or not answered at all. Okay, so please bubble in your Scantron for all 110 items. Okay, again, I just mentioned that the items on this test are unit weighted. That's a fancy way to say that every item carries the same amount of points. So if you come across an item that you think, oh my gosh, this is so easy, it's going to count just as much as those more difficult questions are. So, you really want to maximize your ability to get as many points possible on this test. So don't leave any items blank. Okay. I once was a grad school student, and I remember the days of standardized tests, and I can't stand trick questions. I didn't like it when I was a test taker. I don't like it as a business owner and test developer. So I am not here to trick candidates. I am here to provide a fair and equal opportunity for every single candidate to demonstrate that they possess the minimum competencies needed on this test. There are no trick questions. You will either have the information in front of you in the form of reading passages for the reading items, for example, to be able to answer the question, or life should have prepared you by now to know basic grammar, spelling, basic ability to add, subtract, and multiply, and so on and so forth. So no trick questions, not on my tests. Okay. So a little summary then. Before I hit the summary, I want to mention one more thing about the answer sheets. Some of you perhaps have not taken a standardized test before, whereby you have an answer sheet and a number 2 pencil, and you're asked to bubble in your answers to those A, B, C, D items. Make sure that you fully fill in that circle or those bubbles on your answer sheet. Do your best to not have stray pencil marks. If you're writing and your lead breaks and your pencil kind of goes flying and you see a little bit of a pencil stray mark on your answer sheet, do your best to erase that so that there are no stray marks. And if you bubble in an answer, and then with any time you may have left, if you say, you know what, I'm going to go back and review my choices, and oh, I didn't mean to put A for number 1, I meant to put B. Erase fully A from the answer sheet and very heavily darken in B. We run all kinds of checks on our end when we get the answer sheets. They go through the machines and we run reports to check for double bubbles or answers that are left blank. So even though it's not a requirement for us to go in and do that level of cleanup, if you will, if we see a candidate who maybe, didn't erase well enough, but it's very evident what answer they meant to bubble in, we can assist that way. But in instances where candidates think they're going to be clever and bubble in 2 answers for 1 question, that does not get that's a 0 point. They do not get any credit for double bubbles. So don't double bubble. Okay, back to the summary then. On the day of the written test, do what you can to show up well rested, be clean and in a presentable manner while you're obviously being evaluated on the skills and abilities that are being measured in the written test. There's eyes everywhere, right? We're grown adults. We're perhaps vying for a position in a very noble profession where it matters, how we conduct ourselves. And so, horse playing and loud joking and poor language, nasty language, not super professional language is not great for anybody to hear. So just remember, you're competing against all of those around you for some highly coveted opportunities, and so just make the best of that. Remain quiet during test time. You don't want anybody to think that you're doing anything that's not allowed on the test. Have your phone off. Don't be looking at your phone during the test. You wouldn't want a proctor to think that you're looking at a calculator or anything. So just use really good judgment in how you present yourself and present yourself to the proctors, that you really are doing everything you can to demonstrate that you're trying to do things the right way. All right. Also, just relax. There's 110 items on this test, and the items do not require any type of preparation on your part. So if for some reason you didn't spend as much time as you wish you would have reviewing that candidate orientation or watching those video clips, that's okay. There are plenty of candidates that do well and pass these tests without those optional preparatory materials, but it certainly can't hurt you to have access to them, okay? And lastly, just know that this test is not a measure of your self-worth or your overall intelligence. It's possible that perhaps you performed not so great on other tests with other vendors in the past, and that does not necessarily mean that you will not do well on this test, okay? As I think you can see with just the way that we've put this test together, the fact that it's unit weighted, it's scored in a compensatory fashion, it's a different test than some of those that perhaps you've taken elsewhere, all right? So unlike other firefighter tests, we aren't just focusing heavy on cognitive components. We think that certainly different cognitive skills like reading, writing, and math have their place in identifying successful firefighters, but we don't think that they are the end-all be-all. And so that's why we make sure that we fold in a good measure of human relations skills. That type of balance testing is ultimately what's going to yield the best firefighter candidate for Rochester, and is going to ensure that that every candidate has a fair opportunity to do well on the test. Okay, that brings me to the end of the presentation. I'm happy to open it up to any questions that you might have.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Yes. How long does it take to process the written results of the exam? They will be getting the results as soon as everybody has taken the exam. It'll be about a couple of weeks before we'll get stuff back from them. And then we have to go through our process through civil service to get it established. So it'd be a month, maybe 2 months before.
Okay. I see a couple questions popping up here, Kim. One of them is calculators used on the test? And the answer is no calculators. The math that's measured is basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and you are allowed to write in the test booklet. So make whatever hand calculations you need in the test to be able to work out the answers. Okay. Where's the exam being taken? That would be a Kim question.
We have it scheduled at Monroe Community College right now, but we don't have the specific locations yet. Once this closes out and we know exactly how many people are going to be attending, when you receive your admission letter, it will tell you where to report at MCC for the exam on the day of the exam, which is January 14th, 2023.
What is the max score that can be achieved on the test? 110. A high score of 110 is the best you can do on this exam. And do you have to be a city resident prior to taking the test? That's a Kim question.
You do not have to be a city resident to take the exam, but you will have to move into the city and be a city resident before the physical agility portion of the exam, the PACER exam, which I believe the date is March 11th of 2023.
Is there a time limit for the test? We allow.
We have just one.
I'm sorry.
We just have one addition to the residency program.
Okay.
I would refer to the city website for information on city guidelines for what is considered a city property and where the lines are and what date. Sorry.
That's okay. I saw a question about a time limit. I believe that the time allowed for the test is 3 hours. The vast majority of candidates will finish this test in an hour, hour and a half, but you are allowed up to 3 hours to take the test. I believe that it's 3 hours. It might be 2.5, but I'm sorry. I'm quite certain that it's 3 hours. They'll tell you, and it'll say in the administration instructions. Okay, thank you.
I have another question in the back. Hold on. The question was if you are hired, um, how long will it take for the academy? And that is 7 months, and you will be paid during that time frame. Yes. Human relations portions of the test.
Best way and type of question. Right. What are best
What are the best ways to tackle those questions and to try to study or learn those answers, or how to address those answers on those questions?
Yeah, so okay. So here's the reality with those types of questions. You want to imagine that you are going to answer that question in the best light possible. So we obviously hope that everybody is going to answer those questions in a way that they really would behave that way, right? They would behave, they know the difference between right and wrong. That's really the spirit behind those human relations items. I had a fire chief years ago say to me, that it's a different situation if once they get on the job, they don't behave in the right way. I can take care of that once they're here, but I need to know that I'm hiring people that know the difference between right and wrong. So that's why we created those questions, and that's why the job experts who create those items with a unanimous agreement identify the most appropriate and the least appropriate. So as far as how to tackle those questions, imagine that you're putting yourself, or you're handling that situation with firefighter John or Garcia or whoever he was in that sample question. What would be the absolute best way, and put him in the best light for handling that situation? And hopefully it's going to align with how you would handle that situation.
We do have a question on there about receiving information with dates and times for the test. The test will be January 14th at Monroe Community College. If you have not received an admission letter via email or hard copy, depends on how you signed up to receive that information, you can call our office after January 7th. Admission letters should go out prior to that, probably at the beginning of January. But if you have not received anything a week before the exam, certainly give us a call at 585-428-8900, and we will make sure that we've got you on our list and we can check your address to see where it got sent to. It's 585-428-8900. You're welcome. Yes. Yes. We will post this on the website after it's been downloaded and cut out some of the cityofrochester.gov, and then under the employment section or firefighter webpage.
We will send an email to everyone signing up for the exam with a link to that page on the city website.
We will also send out an email to everyone who has signed up with the link and how to access that. Anything else? Yes. From the exam itself?
So we will be holding what's called applicant assistance workshops coming up here. We're going to be holding 2 of them. We'll be receiving information about those. At those workshops, we will go over everything that has to do with the hiring. Additionally, at that workshop will be members of the RP background unit that does do backgrounds. The firefighter position at the city of Rochester. So they'll be there to help you complete your background questionnaire and answer any questions about that, as well as answer any private questions. Anything that may or may not respond.
Stacy, were you able to hear Tom talk about that?
A little bit, but it was
Okay.
keeps fading out a little.
So the question was, could anything prevent you from the hiring process. And Tom mentioned that there are going to be 2 workshops that will be coming up, going over the hiring process after the exam, and we will be notifying everyone via email of those workshop dates so that they can sign up to come and hear.
Okay.
Yeah. Are safety reasons the only reason you would want to go to your supervisor uh, um, instead of working it out among each other for the human relations
I mean,
questions?
yeah, safety or a violation, if the vignette, specifically outlines, say, for example, that you're, and again, I'm just totally ad-libbing here, but let's say that, you're not supposed to wear department issued shirts outside of your work hours. And you and a fellow firefighter go out one evening and he's wearing his department specific shirt and gets into a fight. Again, I'm totally ad-libbing here, but it's some example like that. Like if the information is presented to you where you know specifically that this is a violation of what the department expects, and somebody does violate that, that would be an instance where going to the supervisor would maybe not be a bad choice. But again, you really want to come at this from interpersonal skills, and there would be situations of the famous, you go into the station and your buddy is 10 minutes late for shift, and your supervisor has said that this has become a problem, and how would you handle this situation? And instead of automatically assuming that this firefighter doesn't take the job seriously and stuff and going to the supervisor, maybe talking to the firefighter first and finding out, is everything okay? I know his wife has been sick or her husband has been sick or whatever. Let me just make sure that everything's okay, before I jump to a conclusion. So there's a number of different situations that perhaps you'll need to work through and demonstrate interpersonal skills to be able to tell when it's appropriate to go to a supervisor. I brought up just don't feel like you never should choose an ABCD answer if it says talk to your supervisor. Things like sexual harassment, that's a deal breaker. Things like safety violations, that's a deal breaker. If you did something wrong, if you were driving the truck and you left your helmet on the bumper and it fell off, and now you don't have safety equipment that you need, you need to tell your supervisor, I lost track of my helmet. It won't happen again, but I have to let you know because it's not safe for me to work without it. So again, the spirit behind why I even brought that up is I just think a lot of times people see those answers and they think, oh, you don't ever do that. That creates, bad energy in the fire station. Don't ever go to your supervisor. And that's not always the case.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Yes. It would be the Brighton campus, Monroe Community College, Brighton campus. Any other questions? We're getting to be about the time for the end. Looks like we've got all our questions answered over here in the classroom. I don't know if anything's popped up on the chat. I would just like to thank everybody for coming today, and for Stacy presenting your orientation here for the exams. If you guys do have any additional questions that you don't think of now, you can email us at hr@cityofrochester.gov, or you can call 585-428-8900, and we'll be glad to look into the answers if we don't have them and get back to you.
And can I say one last thing, Kim?
Sure.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for attending and for your interest in the position with Rochester Fire. Please don't contact our office specifically for questions about the test, whether it be, did you score the test and can you tell me what my test score is, or anything where you're asking for other information that we didn't cover here. I don't want that to sound rude, but our communication is one directional, specifically with the city of Rochester, and it wouldn't be fair if one candidate was given information and not all candidates. So we're all about equal, fairness and treatment here. So as tempted as you may be to call or reach out to us, just know that we're going to have to respectfully say that we can't, answer those questions and just direct everything back to the city. I hope everyone understands that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks
Everyone, have a
everybody.
great day.
Good luck on the test.
Thank you, Stacy.